Hello, Dr. Carroll. So, this is my educational video. I decided to choose plant propagation for my topic as I am an avid plant owner. I have around 21 or 22 plants, and I've always been fascinated in their ability to propagate via cutting from the stems. So, that's what we will be exploring here. So, hold on. So, how do we get from these cuttings here to cuttings that grow roots from areas on the node where they didn't necessarily have roots to begin with? To understand that, I first started with understanding sexual and asexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction, seen here on the left with the succulent with the flower protruding out of it, which is the sexual organ of that particular plant, is when two parents combine their gametes via pollination or fertilization. This results in progeny that's different from the parents genetically and physically. One advantage of sexual reproduction is it's a way to avoid viruses, pathogens, and diseases that can arise with some of the asexual reproduction methods that will be discussed later. Another advantage of sexual reproduction is the increased genetic variation. So, if there was a pathogen or a disease that was able to exploit one genome of the parent plant, if it was an asexually reproduced clone, both of the plants would die off. But if a plant produced through sexual reproduction, that progeny would have a chance of surviving due to its genetic variation. Now, asexual reproduction, seen by the Albo monstera cutting on the right, is reproduction from a single parent plant, and that regenerates an exact copy of the parent. That offspring will be genetically identical to the parent. Now, advantages for this are that compared to the time it takes to reproduce sexually, either via seed, it is much faster with the asexual methods. And another advantage is that it maintains some of the attributes of the parent plant. So I chose this picture of the Alba monstera to highlight the cultivation community. This plant, this Alba monstera, cuttings for this plant generally go for hundreds to thousands of dollars, as the white variegation on that monstera leaf is coveted in the plant community. So, cultivators will take cuttings from the parent plant in hopes to generate that same physical attribute from the parent, made possible through asexual reproduction. Now, we're going to focus on some of the methods of asexual reproduction. And first is fission. Fission is a form of asexual reproduction when an organism replicates itself and its genetic material, and it splits into two exact copies of that organism. Now, fission occurs mostly in prokaryotic organisms and in some multicellular organisms, but not in plants, and these often happen on a very microscopic level. Now, next is spore formation. Spore formation is when the parent plant produces many spores that are each capable of germinating and producing new plants. Often seen under this fern frond, these spores will be taken by the wind and they land in many different areas, and if they land in an environment with favorable conditions, they will hopefully undergo successful germination, creating an entire new plant. Another method for this for of asexual reproduction in plants is budding. Budding is when a clone of the parent plant grows off of the parent itself and eventually detaches. Many of my plants are actually air plants, which don't grow in soil. This is one of my air plants here, and you can see the mother plant is in the middle with the sort of the red leaves coming off of it. And then there's a smaller bud of the mother growing off, and eventually that bud will detach from the mother, thus creating two different plants. Another form of asexual reproduction is vegetative propagation. This is done by using vegetative parts of a parent plant, the vegetative parts being the stem, the roots, and the leaves, to generate a whole new plant. This right here is my silver satin pothos that I took a cutting from my friend's mother plant, and it has since rooted in the water and will be transferred to soil soon. And so there are two types of vegetative propagation: natural and artificial. Natural referring to when a new plant is propagated from the parent plant without any human intervention. Artificial being when humans are involved in that propagation somehow. So I'm going to go over 3 different methods for natural vegetative propagation. First, in the big picture seen here, is a method called running. Running is when a stem runs horizontally. It is referred to as the runner, but its proper name is the stolon. And it runs across the ground until it eventually forms adventitious roots at a node, forming an entire new plant bud. Plants that utilize this method are strawberry plants, and they often form many different runners and resulting in several different plants coming off of it. Another form of natural vegetative propagation is in the top right picture, bulbs. Bulbs are a larger part of the shoot that is beneath the ground that contains food and nutrients in the leaves. You see there are kind of these leaves growing off of the bud. They're kind of layered on there. And those nutrients are used for the bulb to grow offshoots, which are just new parts of the plant that grow out of the ground. Examples of plants that reproduce via bulbs would be the flowers, lilies, and iris, but also shallots and onions. Often you can see pictures online of people that take the roots off of their green onions and they put those in water, and over time they get more offshoots of the green onion, which I find is very interesting, and I have also done a couple times, but unfortunately I didn't have a picture to include. In the bottom right is a tuber. Now, tubers utilize horizontal rhizomes that are enlarged and store root nutrients, and they can grow buds that form entire new plant shoots off of them and out of the ground. Examples of tuber plants would be potatoes, carrots, turnips, and interestingly enough, we as humans, we eat the actual rhizome that contains the nutrients that which grows under the ground. So the potato, ginger is another one. The carrots, so root vegetables. And so now we're gonna go over artificial vegetative propagation. So in the larger picture here, we have cuttings that are in water to grow roots. Now, these cuttings are snipped off part of the parent plant, some of the stems, and they regenerate a new plant from that cutting. Different types of plants will require different parts of the plant to be cut off. So there are some stem cutting propagates, there are root propagates, and even leaf propagates, which is seen in succulent leaves and other plants of the sort. In the bottom right picture is the layering method. Layering is when part of the stem is bent and buried underneath the soil. And at the node, adventitious roots grow from the part of the stem that is layered underneath the soil. Sometimes if the stem isn't pliable enough to be bent underneath the soil, there is a method where part of the stem is damaged purposefully to make it pliable enough to bend underneath the soil. In the top right picture is an example of grafting. Grafting is when a cutting is taken from one plant and then it is attached to another so that it utilizes the vascular system of the plant that it is attached onto. So an example of grafting that I find very intriguing is there are trees that have been created that grow several different types of fruit, which this tree here had several different types of fruit tree cuttings grafted onto it, and thus it bears many different forms of fruit. So this is all made possible by the plant hormone auxin. Vegetative propagation is successful when adventitious roots can be generated from the cutting or the part of the plant that is underneath the soil. Adventitious roots are referred to as roots that grow from abnormal parts of the plant, such as leaves, or different parts of the stems, such as the nodes or aerial roots. Auxin is one of the main hormones produced by the plant for growing adventitious roots. It is also responsible for slowing stem elongation to allow the cuttings to divert their attention to growing the adventitious roots so they can form. And here you can see in this picture there is a plant cutting that has started to form an adventitious root, and at the site of that adventitious root there is a higher concentration of auxin, which allows the plant to form the root. So that is all I have. Here are my citations. And Dr. Carroll, I would like to say I really enjoyed your class. It has been, I particularly enjoyed our latest lesson in regeneration, but I enjoyed the whole embryology class, and I wish you a good summer, and thank you for teaching me this semester.